All right, cool. Thank you. All right, it is 6:05, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jacob. I'm a therapist here at Therapy Works, and today I'm going to talk to you about the shoulder. So, starting with any joint really, it's best to usually start with the anatomy. So, with the shoulder joint in particular, the anatomy is oriented in such a way that it makes the shoulder joint really unstable. So the shoulder joint gives you more motion than almost any other joint in your body because we do so much with our arms. And in order to allow all of that motion, there has to be a trade-off. So we give up some stability, like the stability we get in our hips, so that we can have more mobility in our shoulders. So got a little model here. This would be a right shoulder. So the shoulder blade, the humerus, the arm bone, and then the clavicle. These are going to be your three bones that make up the shoulder. And then this shoulder would sit on your rib cage, sort of like that, with this being on the back. And then these three bones have four joints that are considered part of your shoulder. We have the main joint, the glenohumeral joint. This is where your humerus meets your shoulder blade. Then we have the joint where your clavicle, your collarbone here, well, that has to come all the way out and attach onto your shoulder blade as well, and that's your sternoclavicular joint. Then we have the joint where your clavicle attaches to your sternum in the front. So even though it's all the way up here, that's still considered part of your shoulder because that clavicle is actually the only bony attachment that your shoulder has to the center of your body, to your axial skeleton. And then the fourth joint, which is a little different than the others, is where your shoulder blade sits on your ribs in the back. And that's your scapulothoracic joint, but it doesn't actually have any direct attachments, but that floating motion that the shoulder blade has to do over your thoracic spine, we're going to call it a joint for that reason. So after we've gone over the anatomy, the bony anatomy, let's go ahead and talk about the motions of the shoulder. So for the shoulder blade, we're going to have more plane motions that occur in a plane. So we have up and down, and for that we just call it elevation and depression, pulling it all the way down, so elevation and depression. Then we have protraction, so coming really far forward, and retraction, pulling really far back. So those all kind of happen in one plane, up, down, left, right. And then we also have elevation, or upward rotation and downward rotation, and that is where the shoulder blade, in order to let the humerus come up, the shoulder blade has to rotate out. So when you come out and raise your shoulder or your arm all the way up, that shoulder blade also has to move on that scapulothoracic joint. So in order to get that motion, we have to have the muscles to create the movement. So we have big muscles that are a little further away from the shoulder that provide our really gross or large movements. So our chest, our pec muscle, in the back we have a big lat muscle, and those are powerful muscles that help pull the joint down or forward and back, depending on which one it is. The big ball that you have here on the outside of your shoulder, well, some people, Thomas Robinson had a really big ball on his shoulder when he played for KU. I really liked looking at his deltoids, and that's what the name of that muscle is the deltoids on the outside of your shoulder, and that provides some of that elevation. But once you get past those bigger exterior muscles, we get to the smaller ones on the inside that are going to make up your rotator cuff. And so for that, the rotator cuff is going to be four muscles. One starts here on the back, or the under the scapula. So we're going to call that the subscapularis, and that attaches to the arm and pulls your arm inward. Then on the back of the scapula, we're going to have two muscles that pull your arm out, and that's going to be your infraspinatus, so it's below the spine of the scapula, and then your teres minor. The other rotator cuff muscle that a lot of people are going to end up having issues with at some point in their life is the supraspinatus, and it's right here above the spine of your scapula, and that's the primary mover to getting your arm started in this motion overhead. So that one is a really small muscle relative to the joint, and it has a really big job. So that muscle can become really irritated if we overuse it, doing a lot of overhead motions and some other things. So when we do move our shoulder or move our arm all the way up, it's important to kind of understand how those bones move in conjunction with each other. So that arm going up, just that glenohumeral joint, that main joint that we first talked about, that's going to do 66% of the motion. So it's going to go 120 degrees. But from here to here is 180 degrees. So we have to get that extra 60 degrees from somewhere else, and that's where the motion of the scapula comes in. And we're going to get 60 degrees from that and 120 degrees from our arm moving. So that's another part of the shoulder that can, that because of that, we can get issues that on the top of the shoulder, we're getting a pressure or a resistance and we can't quite get our arm up. And a lot of times it's not even because of the glenohumeral joint, the joint we normally think of as the shoulder, it's because this scapula is stuck. Either a muscle is overactivated and really holding your shoulder in, or for some other reason the shoulder blade isn't moving very well. And I will be putting some exercises on this later. I don't have them ready right now, but we will go over a few and then I'll attach them here so that we can get some more mobility. All right, so we've already talked a little bit about how the shoulder works and mentioned briefly some of the types of pain or causes of pain, but in general, the majority of shoulder problems are going to be soft tissue. So we're either dealing with a tendonitis, muscle irritation. We have bursas, which are little sacs that help the joint be more lubricated when it moves. When those become inflamed, we get issues. Adhesive capsulitis or frozen shoulders, I'm sure many of you have heard of, where that shoulder is just not moving and that connective tissue around the glenohumeral joint is kind of stuck. And then you can also have fractures or osteoarthritis, but those aren't quite as common in the shoulder as some of the other issues. So as far as avoiding shoulder pain, one of the biggest and most important things to do is warm up before you do any exercise. So if you're going to go out and do yard work and you're going to be skimming some grass off the lawn, that's a really aggressive motion for your shoulder, and you're going to want to do some warm-ups before that. Same thing would apply if you're going to the gym. Before you lift the heavy weights, make sure that you got all of the little muscles moving and well innervated before you get going. Try to start with light weights before you do any of those activities. That goes right along with the warming up. Don't jump right into your max on the bench press. That's going to be a really good way to irritate those shoulders or cause an injury. We also want to avoid any really sustained position. So we generally think of this as overhead. So people who have to paint ceilings, you're going to have a lot of issues with that shoulder if your arm is up in this position a whole lot. So it's going to be really important to keep a really stable and strong shoulder if you're going to do anything like that. The other position that we see have a huge effect on the shoulder is the one that we all develop when we sit and work on a computer too long, and those shoulders come forward and our head comes forward. And we call this the rounded shoulder forward head posture, because that's rounded shoulders, forward head. But that can really impinge on those structures on the top of the shoulder, because if you're bending forward and you try to lift that arm up, you're going to get a restriction. It's not going to go up unless you get into that good position and allow that scapula to move properly. All right. Okay, sorry, I had to scroll down a little bit. I was only reading half a question and it didn't make very much sense. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to keep up with these as we go. So the longer that you have a restriction with the shoulder, just to address, if someone can't see the chat, a question was asked about if I've had a restriction for 6 years, a really long restriction in my shoulder mobility, can I do some stretches to get it moving better, or am I just kind of stuck in this situation? At least that's how I'm interpreting the question. And yes, you can definitely do work to improve the mobility and control that you have over that shoulder. But unfortunately, the longer that we deal with shoulder injuries, the harder it's going to be to rehab. So you might not ever get full motion back, and the movements that you can gain, they're going to be a little bit more hard fought. It will take more effort, more consistency, and adherence to whatever program you're on, so that you can make sure that you keep those gains that you do get. And then you'll have to stick with exercising and moving that shoulder and keeping those stretches going more consistently than other people will have to. If you have a young and healthy shoulder that has an injury, you rehab it, they probably won't have to do all that much to keep their shoulder moving well. But if you're someone who's had a really chronic injury, you might have to do a home exercise program really kind of for the rest of your life, but it will just become easier. So once you gain that motion, you gained it because you were doing exercises twice a day, every day. Well, maybe once you have it and you've had it for a little while, now you can step it back and you only need to do your exercises once a day, 3-4 times a week. So yes, you can make the improvements, but it's harder to get those improvements. And then once you get them, it's easier to lose them. So it's the same thing with when we get older, our muscles start wasting away faster, and it's harder to build the muscles. So it's really important that the longer we've had an injury, the more we stick with the rehab. Just back to other things that can cause shoulder pain is improper form when you're exercising. So if you are having shoulder pain when you're performing exercises, seek help. See if you can look up, am I doing this exercise correctly online? If that doesn't help, maybe find a personal trainer. If that doesn't help, then you should definitely seek out a health professional or come to a physical therapist, and we can take a look and kind of try to figure out what's going on. Other things that isn't thought of quite as often is reducing stress. So stress can be held in our shoulders, particularly in the tops of your shoulders or the bottom of your neck, and you can get quite a bit of pain up in the muscle that sits right on top of your shoulder called your upper trap or your upper trapezius. And so sometimes reducing stress, doing breathing exercises, making sure you get enough sleep, that can be one of the most important parts of the shoulder rehab, particularly when the pain is higher up in the shoulder or even in the bottom of the neck. And you really just need to listen to your body. So if you're doing an activity that's causing you pain, stop and try to figure out, okay, is it just because I've been doing this activity too much, or am I doing this activity incorrectly? It's probably one of the two. So take a break, see if the pain goes away. If the pain goes away, try doing the activity again. And if the pain comes back, it probably means you're not doing the activity quite correctly, and see if you can modify it in some way so that it's not as painful. So along with reducing stress, it's really important, particularly for your shoulders and your neck, that you get good sleep. So shoulders are notorious for being difficult to sleep with. When we're having a lot of pain in our shoulder, you roll over and that shoulder falls forward, or you're a side sleeper and you really love sleeping on that right side, but that right shoulder has just been nagging you. And so even though you're getting to sleep just fine on your left, you roll over in the middle of the night and now you're awake for another hour because that right shoulder pain really grabbed you. So it's important to really work on sleep hygiene. I know plenty of people that just cannot sleep on their back. This is generally what I tell people initially, is if you can sleep on your back, particularly after an acute shoulder injury, that's going to be your best bet to getting that shoulder into a comfortable position where it's not going to be waking you up throughout the night. That's one of those activities that's probably going to, takes a few nights to get used to, and you'll just kind of have to fight through it and do some meditation, work on your breathing, whatever it takes to get calm and relaxed while on your back, and see if you can get to sleep that way. Also, the other things that I'm sure you guys have heard, try to reduce cell phone usage, watching TV, anything where you're looking at a screen or your brain's really active in bed, save that for somewhere else. And in fact, if your bed should be for sleep, so if you're laying in bed for 30, 45 minutes, completely restless and not, even getting a little bit drowsy, get up and just go into a different room, read a book for 30 minutes, listen to really low volume classical music, something that gets you out of that room and can get you into that tired state again while you're not in bed, just beginning to associate bed with restlessness. If you are a side sleeper and sleeping on your back is not an option, this, how I know a lot of people sleep, I personally love sleeping that way. It's not a good position for your shoulder. If you're going to sleep on your side, it's good to have a pillow kind of on your stomach, and then you can relax and have that arm in a good comfortable position while laying on your side. And then to prevent rolling onto that injured shoulder, go ahead and stick a pillow under your back so that when you start to roll, you aren't going to make it all the way onto your back and then over onto your shoulder. So if you're a side sleeper and you're dealing with a shoulder injury, really important to try to situate the pillows in a way that can keep you from being woken up 2-3 times during the middle of the night. If you have any questions on the warm-ups, just shoot us a text. We can easily, or shoot us an email, and then I'm going to put a really general, easy warm-up exercise program on the page within the next day or two. So if you're looking for something for that, go ahead and just check back there. And then as far as what we do in PT for shoulders, I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're on this page, have had it before. The number one thing is going to be exercise. So we're looking to improve your flexibility, your mobility, and then strengthening. We got to get nice, strong, stable shoulders because the joint is so inherently unstable. That takes a lot of strength and a lot of different muscles to keep it moving properly. The other thing we're going to work on is motor control, so making sure that your muscles are activating when they should and shouldn't. A lot of people are going to have overactive traps, so anytime they lift their arm, that shoulder comes up, and that's really something that we need to work on. We can do joint mobs to improve the mobility of the actual joint itself. I'd say almost every single person we see for shoulders, there's some sort of postural component. We're going to do something to get them to open up, get their neck in better position, and just so that throughout the day they can do that more often. We don't expect someone to sit perfect form for 24 hours a day, but you need to be going back to the good form as your home base as opposed to this being your home base. And then we can also use modalities, ice, heat, ultrasound, E-stim, iontophoresis is another process we can do if your shoulder issues kind of warrant that. And then just to sum it all up, shoulder is a great joint, huge amount of mobility, and we need to keep that mobility as much as we can. But with that mobility comes the instability. And the metaphor I most like for it is the hip joint is a ball and socket joint. So that hip joint really kind of fits into a socket and it's nice and stable. The shoulder joint is also classified as a ball and socket joint, but it's a ball and socket more in the way that a golf ball sits on a golf tee. It's a really important joint, and you really have to keep all of those muscles around it strong and stable to prevent any injuries to your shoulder, and keep it functioning for the life that you're using it for. So, all right, does anybody have any questions that they want to type into the chat? I'll be on here for a little bit longer. And if you don't ask questions, I will just be sitting here awkwardly looking at you. Oh, there we go. We have lots more questions. Sorry. Again, forgot to scroll. All right. Great shoulder mobility, but elbow pain. Could it be coming from our shoulder? Yes. In fact, the shoulder is one of the toughest joints to kind of figure out where the pain's coming from, because we can get pain from the shoulder itself. We can get pain from the neck. Or like I was talking about, sometimes it's just stress and our muscles are getting really tight and irritated, and so it could be from a point that doesn't generally cause the pain. So elbow pain could definitely be coming from the shoulder. That's a really common place to have what we call referred pain. So that could be we could be dealing with a rotator cuff pathology, light tear, irritation there, or even something in your neck such as a disc issue, or something along those lines where a problem in your neck is grabbing one of those nerves and kind of sending that pain out into your elbow, or even all the way into your hands. So definitely could be coming from your shoulder with any elbow issue. All right, I guess I do have a stick here. So just real quick, a lot of people with shoulder problems are going to have issues with internal rotation, and that is this motion. For males, generally we just have to reach our belt, not too hard, but if you need to reach up higher to unhook a bra or something, and that's becoming an issue, one of the easiest and lightest stretches you can do is just grab a stick or a broom, and you're going to use your good hand and make it do most of the work, and it's going to pull up, and then your shoulder that's having the problem is just kind of along for the ride initially, and you're just going to pull up as high as you can and hold that for a few seconds and then let it come down. That's a really good way to get that internal rotation started. If you've been doing that for a little while and that's still not working, one of the things you can do is you can drop a towel or a belt over your shoulder and then grab that belt, pull it up, and then this one is a little more comfortable to hold because it doesn't take much force here, and I'm getting a really good amount of torque. But that stretch is a little more aggressive, and you don't want to pull too hard because sometimes that alone can irritate some more muscles in your shoulder. As far as the external rotation, so getting to your head, that's a little bit tougher. The easiest way I've found is using a wall. So if you stand like this, just put that wall on your hand, kind of rotate out a little bit, and that will give you that stretch into that external rotation range. So standing here and just rotate away, and you'll get a good stretch that way. And like I said, I do plan on attaching a few exercises, one for stretching and one for warming up your shoulder before exercises. So come back to this page, and that should be up at some point by tomorrow evening. So that's all I got for you guys. and I hope you enjoy the video. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to call us at Therapy Works, and we'll try to get everything sorted out. All right, hope you guys have a good night.